So if you didn't see the news, PlayStation is going to be ending physical disc production for new games coming to the platform in January of 2028, and I can't lie, I don't like this business decision at all. And as someone that gives PlayStation a lot of praise when they do really cool things, in particularly with the exclusives they've been releasing on their platform, I think it's also fair and valid to give them criticism when they make mistakes like these, because I just think this is a terrible decision all around for so many different reasons. So first up, game ownership. If you buy a game digitally on the PlayStation platform, you're not actually buying the game, but rather you're buying a license to the game. That means when it comes to digital ownership with PlayStation, you don't own the game that you've bought. And you may be wondering, why is this even an issue if I can just download the game and play it on my console without having to worry about going to a store to buy the game, and I can still access it whenever I want? And that's the problem, because you can't necessarily download it whenever you want if PlayStation decides that they don't want you to play it anymore. With the perfect example being, and I can't believe this is happening within the same week that PlayStation's announced this, PlayStation has removed over 500 movies from people's accounts that they can no longer access even if they have purchased them with their PlayStation account. So the fact that PlayStation have shown that over the last week, even games that you have purchased, you don't actually own and that they can remove it at any time from your account is absolutely wild. And like, yes, I get the idea of digital ownership, and especially in 2026 and beyond, like, we are in a very digital era, right? But we also should have the option to access things in other ways if we want. For example, yes, music. Let's be honest, Spotify, streaming, very popular nowadays. However, if you want to, you can still go into a store and buy a CD. You can still go into a store and buy a vinyl. Movies, you can still buy DVDs. You can still buy Blu-rays or 4K discs. Like, you're not just restricted to Netflix. So why for gaming are we starting to go with this all digital model? It's a very anti-customer type practice, and the crazy thing about this is that back in 2013 when the Xbox One and PS4 came out, one of the biggest things that PlayStation announced that got people on their side and had fans very happy with the company as a whole is the fact that when Xbox kind of said, hey, we're bringing in all this DRM stuff, you gotta constantly access the internet if you want to access your games, PlayStation said, hey, you know what? If you want to share a game with someone, here, take this physical disc and pass it along, and made a whole running meme out of the fact that you could just pass a disc and use used games and you could access games however you wanted to. But 15 years later, it seems like that's not going to be the case anymore, and having access to physical media also means that there is more competition when it comes to pricing and more options for gamers when it comes to the prices that they pick up games. As a perfect example, as someone like myself, I'm a big fan of the NBA and I love playing the NBA 2K series. Now, if you're a fan of any type of sports game, you will know that after the game has come out and it's been out for about a year, it's pretty much irrelevant at that point. The servers start to go down, the rosters are outdated, and you kind of have to move to the next version. And those game prices for sports games go down incredibly quickly. Like, if we look at, for example, last year's NBA game, NBA 2K25, that game, I believe, released for around $100, $120. That game has now been reduced to $28 for a pre-owned disc of the game. That is like a 75% decrease in price. And that's a really big discount. And you'd think that, okay, well, if the physical versions had such a big discount, you would think that the digital edition has had a huge discount as well, because they don't have to pay for manufacturing of the discs, they don't need to distribute the discs, they just need to host the servers for the game and let people download it. So surely it's going to be much cheaper, right? No. NBA 2K25 on the PlayStation Store as a digital edition costs, I kid you not, $120 for the standard edition. That's right, $120 still for the standard edition. And the thing that makes things worse is that's not even considered full price in Australia. That is considered more than full price, because if you are to go into any physical game store in Australia, whether it be EB Games, JB Hi-Fi, Big W, Target, any of the kind of like brick and mortar stores, most disc editions of games are sold for a maximum of about $100, unless it's like a really huge like PlayStation exclusive release. So for a game that at new you could probably buy for $100 for a disc edition is being sold a year later with outdated rosters, with servers that are probably about to be shut down either within the next year or two, for more than you would typically pay for a full price physical edition. And on top of the game prices, some games you can't even get anymore. If we look at older NBA 2K games like NBA 2K14, 15, 16 from the PS4, Those games, if you go into places like EB Games, you can pick them up pre-owned in Australia for, I kid you not, about $1 to $2. Not even exaggeration, I'll put it up on the screen. You can literally buy those games for like $1 to $2. That also shows how much the pricing of some of these sports games goes down. And if you look at the PlayStation Store, how much they are, you can't even buy them on there. So not only are prices more expensive to buy it digitally on the PlayStation Store, you can no longer access purchasing them on the PlayStation Store. So accessibility with digital games isn't necessarily better either. Another example of that is with the game PT. And I think just about all horror fans will admit that that was like the most hyped game that had been released on the PlayStation Store. The game that, if you were a horror fan, you wanted to download and play that. And the fact that after licensing issues, and it sounds like the game was going to be cancelled, PlayStation ended up removing the PT demo from the online store. And even though that was a game and a demo that people really loved, were really hyped to play, people who didn't get to play it can no longer go onto the store and download it anymore. And the only way people can actually access that demo nowadays is if they buy a PlayStation 4 console with an account on it that has the game already downloaded, because if you uninstall that game from your account on your console, you could not re-download that game. The fact that you can buy something, even in that case where it's free, that you can buy something and not have access to it and not have the ownership of something that you have purchased digitally, that is an issue. And what makes things worse, even if you've purchased the license for a game, you can't transfer ownership on it to a different account, you can't trade it in for a different game, you can't sell off the license, you're basically stuck with it. Now if you had a physical game and you decide, you know what, I no longer want this game anymore, I can take it to EB Games and sell it and trade it in. I can sell it on eBay. I can sell it on Facebook Marketplace. I can sell it to a friend. Heck, I can even just give it to a friend if I want to. But with licensing of digital games, you can't do that at all. So yet again, it's just another way that your ability to actually have ownership of the stuff that you've purchased is being limited, and your accessibility to the games that, yet again, you have either purchased or that you should be able to access is being limited as well. So yeah, I just don't like this decision at all, because it limits people's access to games, limits people's options for pricing on games, and limits the preservation of games to be able to be accessed, whether it's in 5, 10, 15 years time. And like, even with the PlayStation storefront, PlayStation is currently facing multiple lawsuits for having monopoly-like practices. And despite all of that, I've still seen some people arguing that this decision to go all digital by PlayStation is a good one. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've seen an argument that I agree with so far for that point of view. And if you think you've got one, please let me know in the comment section down below, because I am genuinely curious why you would think this is a good idea. But I did want to talk about some that I have seen and just straight out say why I don't think these are a good idea. Firstly, that people are mostly buying digital nowadays. Yes, I get we're in the year 2026. Most things are available for people digitally, whether that's streaming or online purchases. You are correct. And you know what? I'll probably say that most purchases are made through digital. I would not be surprised. However, as we mentioned earlier, people also have the option for just about all of those other mediums that are sold digitally to be able to purchase them physically. Music, with CDs, with vinyls, with movies, you can get DVDs, you can get Blu-rays, you can get 4K discs. There are still other options for people who want to buy physically and to be able to resell their stuff. So yes, do a lot of people buy digitally nowadays? Sure, but there is still a huge market and at least the option for people to buy physically, even in all of those markets. And like music, I would say is a much more digital platform thing than gaming. So the fact that that's starting to go away is just wild. Secondly, that they're cheaper, and as we discussed with the NBA 2K example earlier on, digital games aren't cheaper, and in a lot of cases they're actually more expensive if they're just on an exclusive storefront. So yeah, I don't buy that argument whatsoever, unless you're like a rare platform like Steam that does have really cheap sales, or a game is like 10 years old to where there's not much profit anymore, they're just going to drop the price all the way. There are like a few circumstances where yes, games may be cheaper digitally, but like in the grand scheme of things, especially for new games, they're just about always more expensive than the physical version. And finally, the last main reason I have heard to have an all-digital future with PlayStation is disk rot. So if you don't know, disk rot is basically where the disc deteriorates over time to the point where it's unreadable and you can't use it anymore. And yes, while that is a thing, it's not that common of an issue, at least for stuff within probably like, the last 30 years? And for all the discs I've got and I've ever purchased, I don't think I've ever once experienced disk rot among any of the gaming discs or like movie discs or even CDs that I've owned. So yeah, that just doesn't seem like a super big problem to me. Maybe it is in some places, or maybe with some certain manufactured discs by certain companies it is, but it's not anything I've experienced. But yeah, look, overall, I just think this decision to go all digital with PlayStation in the future is just a really bad idea, especially as someone like myself that is a physical collector and will try to buy physical where possible. On top of the fact that it is just also cheaper and you can buy used games and you can at least own a copy of the game, and just the idea of having a physical copy is just always a better idea to me. With everything being said, let me know in the comment section down below what your opinion on physical media is and what you think of this decision by PlayStation. I think my decision's pretty obvious at this point. I just hope PlayStation reverses this decision and eventually decides to continue making physical versions of games. I just think it's a much better decision for gamers and for game preservation as a whole. But yeah,